Welcome back to the Keys Cable and Other Side Adventure Park Food Forest. Since the last time you were here, we just had a casual 140, 150 mile an hour winds. If I'm looking at the building, our salt water came up to about here, and Cat 4 Hurricane Irma. So we've had quite a journey coming back from it, but again, with the help of so many awesome people in the community, the plant community, the extended Florida Keys community, we've come back with a vengeance, and so is the Botanical Garden and our little farm here. So so many new plants, so many things that we learned that I especially didn't know back then, and a lot of different things that have been really cool in terms of, you know, the edible, educational, you know, different experiences that we offer here. So you're looking at a Muntingia, which is a Jamaican cherry, also known as the strawberry tree behind us. And one thing that we really had to do right when the storm hit, it took out a lot of our moringa. We had well over 100 banana trees here probably. And then I had like 6 or 7 varieties of mangoes, avocados, guavanas, one sapodilla. Now we have multiple sapodilla. We've kind of created a storm hardy, salt tolerant set of native species on the outside. We've mixed in a lot more natives with some of the exotics and edibles to try and promote a little bit more resistance in the event of the next storm. And a lot of just different cool things. You know, you've got the hog plum, you've got some jackfruits over here, you've got the really cool hibiscus that as soon as Bongos opens, you know, this makes for a killer edible kind of like taco shell. You can do all sorts of lettuce wraps and stuff like that. This is one of the more prized varieties of sapodilla. This thing actually made it through the storm, but getting stuff like this Jamaican cherry established and putting a canopy back over it, that was the most kind of horrifying thing to see when we came back. Is this thing was all about 20-30 feet tall with canopies that were kind of stretching over everything. You had the full rainforest effect in here. You felt the humidity was a little bit thicker, the moisture in the soil was constant, your growth of weeds and other things on the floor was relatively non-existent. You had really defined pathways. So watching all of that, you know, tall growth, which was kind of softwood fast growth that you're trying to establish so you can get that herbaceous layer growing on the outskirts, and then you have these more long-term slow growth hardwood trees that we would hope for, like the sapodillas or some of your other fruit trees. Now we've used sea grapes and different things that would be actually growing in this natural environment. So we get the moringa, we get the bananas, we get the Muntingia. They all establish our canopy again, while our sapodillas, our sea grapes, our jackfruits, our bay rums, they're all on their way back now. And within another 5 to 10 years, those will kind of take over that canopy layer. And then we start working on different plantings underneath that you'll see featured on our menu at Bongos. And I'm working with 2 awesome Jamaican chefs to help make this whole experience happen there. So their knowledge of, you know, a true Caribbean food menu based off of what we would grow here is second to none. So we've got all the railroad vine, the native morning glory, and different things growing on the ground cover. And yeah, it's been a whole fun process. You know, the moringa, as always, is like just absolute wildfire down here. It's, you know, non-stop food for the bees. The bees love the flowers on this. Your seed pods, this is, you know, one of those cult following trees that everybody comes in and is like, you know about moringa? Of course we know about moringa. But you know, everything from dehydrating the leaves and creating powder and selling the powder as a nutritional supplement to I've met a lot more people now who are actually eating the dried seeds within this, kind of like a nut. They start to peel them. It's not exactly partial to my taste buds, but pull these things open and crack them open and eat it like a little nut. You know, getting to start over with a clean slate was kind of you know, heartbreaking to say the least, but learning a lot of different things that we could grow that I didn't know about the first time around. You know, one of the best ones was the figs, and finding that our climate, you know, even though we're very tropical, isn't necessarily as moist and prone to rain and susceptible to rain as more Caribbean style or South Florida places. So you find things that would be more common in like a Mediterranean, you know, drier, more arid tropical environment, you know, kind of a like tropical Indian type vibe. They just absolutely thrive here. So just looking at, you know, when we get the morning glory vines off of it, we have 5 or 6 different types of figs that have just taken off, and getting to walk you through here and let people try fresh figs off the tree is kind of an exceptional experience. Yeah, the Grumi Chama, and that's like a cherry, right? Yeah, so I haven't really gotten, a lot of these have just started to come back, so I had a few of these planted before, and we put a few more in after the fact because we saw that they were able to survive through the storm. And I've gotten to try them at least once or twice, but we really go for juvenile growth down here so that I'll put in, instead of committing to a really large, 40, 50, 100-gallon pot or something like that, we usually just bring things in 3 to 5 gallons, really try to let them to adapt to the soil, because straight up here when we got into this, there was absolutely no soil here. We've just been bringing in so much compost that you see all of this dirt that you see right here is just absolutely created from non-stop compost, bringing in mulch, laying down green manure, chopping and dropping, and trying to continue with as much organic matter as we can. So it's pretty cool to watch all of that come to life. After, when we took this over, this was nothing but Brazilian pepper, and they had 3 semi-trucks that they had chopped down in here and turned into scrap metal, but they left all of the foam insulation. So we had to clean everything up, and it was scraped down to just cap rock. So what you see here is probably raised up about 3 feet from the cap rock, and that was just from dumping dump truck of mulch that would have otherwise gone to the dump here, and cleaning up all of the organic matter from around the island and continuing to put it in here. So we've got black sorghum, we've got a bunch more coconut palms that we've kind of put into the mix now because of all of the things that made it through the hurricane. The palms were, of course, one of the most hardy and capable trees to go through. This is the first time I've actually seen this flower. So
that one you were expecting, the keys, huh?
Yeah. We've brought in a lot of different cool ground cover flowering plants. What are we working with here? What is that?
Pomegranate?
That is a pomegranate.
Yeah.
That's where Erica comes in and surprises me, and she's like, Maddie, I brought all this stuff. We're going to experiment and see what comes through. So that's killer. Gaillardia down low. And then, of course, summertime, when it does rain, of course it rains and we get about 50-mile-an-hour winds, so everything comes through. We got all the solar panels on top of the building, and the last thing, the building, we lost 2 gutters. The gutters were set up. We were supposed to have these 5,000-gallon cisterns that we're going to end up running all of the irrigation for this, because down here, again, it's feast or famine when it comes to rainwater, and the water all gets piped down from Miami. So we have about a 5-stage filtration system that hits before the irrigation comes into here, and we're stripping all of the chlorine, the fluoride. You'll see a filter after a month of running, and it's so bright red and orange from all the iron that's absorbed from the pipes that comes down. The Biscayne aquifer is amazing in terms of the water quality. Florida has some of the best water in the world. When you got to throw it through a 200-mile pipe that makes it down a grassy key, it kind of disrupts a little bit of it. So the one thing that's funky with the Mintinja is how invasive it actually can be.
Just comes up everywhere.
Yeah, so the roots start to run, but we end up taking them, harvesting them, and it's such a popular tree with the kids that we work with that I'll chop the roots on this, throw it in a pot for a little bit, let it reestablish into a pot, and we sell it to the moms that then get to have one. We just let them know, don't plant it in a place where it can kind of go running wild, because we don't want to cause a whole invasive species take over. Everglades tomatoes, this is one of the favorite things that we're feeding to all of our chickens. And it looks like the sugar apples are just starting to flower too. So things are on the way back. It's been like I said, a trying year. The bananas are always doing their thing down here. We've got some cool ornamental figs that ficuses. And then this is a blue java, which we've been growing since day one, probably about 10 years of growing blue java ice cream bananas. And of course now, via the internet and virality of certain posts, this has become the most popular thing around. And I'd like to say that we were on the forefront of that one. So. And the goal in the long term was always to have a production style fruit farm, a true food forest. That when I lived on site, the beginning of this, I lived in a trailer and I started growing food because the whole idea of, being a former athlete, eating healthy, eating clean, trying to get my body back up from years of abuse. I wanted to see what I could do to sustain my own, life and actually try to eat what I grow. Now with business, it gets even harder and harder, which is why we're trying to build that into the whole platform of this lifestyle, getting different people to start helping harvest, grow, sell, and cook this food on a daily basis, because I spend so much time talking. But we have so many cool kind of like exhibition or constantly producing trees that you got to make sure that there's something for everybody to eat every time you come in here, which is why the Jamaican cherry is such a fantastic specimen, because any little berry that's close to being ripe, you can bring in a kid and tell them it tastes like cotton candy, and next thing you know, they're lit up like a Christmas tree, like, oh my God, Mom, you actually get food off of a tree. And you can kind of bring people back in touch with that cycle as opposed to the shelves of a grocery store. And of course, another one with that is going to be the ever-bearing mulberry. And despite how this thing looks like it's kind of beat up, battered, and not really happy about being here, this thing is just a boss in terms of how hard it produces constantly. And no matter how many times we're in here, it's always producing. Even though the berries are smaller right now because it's a juvenile, I have one at my house where your trunk is actually about 5 to 6 inches thick, and you get the berries that are kind of like the length of your finger, and they get more and more fantastic. So this is probably, we're going to grow a lot of different things that we use specifically for cocktails. The Jamaican cherry will probably end up doing a lot of breakfast pastries and things like that with it, or different desserts and pies and other stuff. But the mulberry, I can't wait to make mulberry mojitos. That's going to just be the next level for me. So again, trying to focus on things that really want to grow in this space, not things that I just wanted to grow. That's one of those humbling moments from the hurricane of trying to learn the more natural process. Don't try to force things to do things that they don't want to do. Create an environment around where they would normally thrive on their own, and try to make it as possible and enable them to thrive in the location. So sapodillas, while they're not native here, they're native to every environment that's almost exactly like it. Then it's Chico Zapote, it's Central and South American, very tropical, very coastal, salt tolerant. And then this is a nice Malayan coconut. And then again, we had this Royal Poinciana that out of all the compost that we were bringing in, we do get a lot of exotic and invasive seeds. And for the most part, I do a good job of pulling them, chopping them, composting them. But when you finally catch one of these flowers in all of its glory, it's really hard to deny that thing from being able to do its thing. So I kind of babied this guy and allowed the canopy to stretch out over this year. And every time I see one of these, you can't help but smile, because that's just nature's beauty in all of its glory. So I think it's going to have to be one to stay. So,
love it.
looks like we got guavas.
I was thinking it was a guava.
Yeah. What's amazing is, I remember being a kid in the Caribbean and spent a lot of time in the Virgin Islands and going to different places, and guavas were like one of those neglected fruits that just did whatever. No matter how hard you tried to kill it, it just continued to thrive. And I've notably had some difficulty here keeping guavas alive, but this one looks just like that. It's pretty neglected. It does have one drip line to it, but there's some fruit on it right now, and it seems to be doing well. So got a jujube right here. Jujubes are also one of those really cool, fun plants that you get a kid in here and you're messing around. They call it a Chinese date sometimes. It actually has more of a consistency like an apple. And as a child, of course, everybody remembers jujube as a candy that you'd buy at your local candy store or drugstore or CVS or something like that. So the kids kind of come here and they go, jujube, I want to try that. And then you pop them into a little baby date-sized apple, and watching their face light up, of course, is totally worth it. So I'm personally a huge fan of tamarins. So tamarins have always been something that you have wild tamarind down here, which is I want to say lycoma or something, as far as I'm terrible with my Latin names. I do know for one thing that the wood on a wild tamarind is incredibly rare, because it's very illegal to cut it down because of how precious it is in the local environment. But when they do fall, and we do get the privilege of finding a naturally fallen one, we do everything we can to salvage the wood, because it is one of the most elegant and fantastic woods that you can find down here that naturally grows. But for local pollinators and things like that, it looks kind of like a woman's tongue. The flowers are these little cotton ball, puff ball type things. But the wild tamarind comes with a long flat leaf that looks like the woman tongue, where the sweet and the sour, either West Indian or East Indian variety, has the really thin ones with the seed pods and the fruit. So this is an East Indian one that's supposed to be more sweet than sour, but you know, it's always what somebody tells you when you're buying it. We'll see when it actually comes to fruit. So.
All right, so last time I was here, Maddie had a little bit of a pro shop set up over here running out of a shipping container. I think they had portalets. So real bathrooms, real pro shop. You guys ready to see inside? Whoa. Woo. Okay, Mr. One Wheel. I was just telling the followers, this place has changed a little bit since the last time.
We've come a long way in a few years. So the surf shop, you know, you can still see the old fish tank circles on the floor, but pretty soon we'll have a whole nother floor upstairs. We got a couple different things in the works for that, and then some staff housing on the top floor, restaurant, bar, all sorts of good stuff. So we're on our way. If I don't kill myself on one of these first.
Custom cups here.
Custom cups, metal cups. If we use plastic, nothing single use, lasts forever, still recyclable. And you know, Yeti's always been a great brand for us. We got a couple little knockoff versions, but we sell the coolers and all the other things. And you know, I've had a Yeti cooler for like 8 years, where I would have had, you know, 25 coolers in the same time span. So it's kind of a testament to itself. So very cool.
Nice.
Wow.
So the way I met Chris was Chris used to live down in Key West, and he had a shop called Bone Island Originals. And where we got into lumber was funny because I was collecting all this organic waste and doing a lot of composting for different people in the Keys, specifically the power company, the electric co-op, the local city of Marathon. And Chris shows up one day, and we're working in the garden cutting down bananas, and I'm like, you know, can I help you? He goes, well, I got these skateboards I want to sell you. I'm like, well, to be perfectly honest, I'm not really in the market to buy them. He goes, well, this is more about the salvation of local timber. I try to find woods that have otherwise been cut down in the city of Key West, and instead of going to the landfill or the dump, I come in, pick them up, saw them up, mill them, and then turn them into these badass skateboards. I'm like, let me put this banana tree down real quick. You got my attention. So Chris would custom lay up these things. This right here looks like it's you've got some cypress, you've got some mahogany, you've got some walnut, maple, a couple different types of wood, some of which local, some of which left over from projects that he would do. He was a custom cabinetry carpenter. And so the idea of, again, saving another local resource and something like the salvation of timber is just such kind of like a triggered thought process for me. So we started working together, and fast forward a few years later, after the hurricane, I'm sitting on so much wood that I couldn't bring wood down to their sawmill anymore in Stock Island. So we decided, you know what, let's start up Grassy Key Millworks, let's get our own mill, let's start slicing and dicing and see what we can make. And that's kind of led into this whole shop. If you look at all of the little fixtures in here, you have, you know, live edge counters right here made from local Cuban mahogany with epoxy pour countertops. Your Yeti shelves are actually sitting on local salvage rainbow eucalyptus, as well as sapodilla mahogany. Right here are two awesome live edge sapodilla pieces, and this is actually Grassy Key sapodilla. So, you know, logs that were just otherwise sitting on the side of the road have been turned into, you know, extravagant little fixtures within the shop. So it's kind of helped curate this whole experience. So pretty fun stuff. So this is just kind of an example of the kind of quality that Chris has kind of gotten us exposed to. So if you look at this, this is like a custom step down on the router line right here. And, you know, this is a real deal cutting board. I've got one right here that has been well weathered and used, and you kind of see it stays up to the test of time. So this was you look like a little mahogany sap line right here. There's some darker tones of sapodilla and some walnut, and then it looks like the inside chatter here is actually a Norfolk Island pine. And what we do is we create a long glue up that, it could be anywhere from 5-6 feet long, and then we'll take the miter saw and we cut all these different little angles, piece them back together, glue them up, and then shape it off whichever way you want. But you can get as far out with the design as you really care to. But right here you see this one is we do a lot of custom inlays, bow ties, different joineries, and I started doing our Green X logo inlaid into certain joints and checks in the wood in the bar. So Chris tried to take it up another notch, and he inlays a circle into an X on top of his custom cutting boards. And if you don't want to cut on it because you feel like you're going to sort of deface a piece of art here, a lot of people are using them as charcuterie boards or meat and cheese boards, things like that. But this right here, you can see the Norfolk Island pine has that blue spalting, and then that's a remnant of a branch sticking out. That's going to be the Cuban mahogany with that beautiful grain work. And it looks like this one's all Cuban mahogany and Norfolk Island pine. This actually is going to be sapodilla right here on that one. So all salvaged local hardwood that would have otherwise ended up in a wood chipper in a the local dump or transfer station, turned into mulch. And usually what happens is they'll take all that organic matter, either dump it in the fill up on the mainland, or a lot of times they'll run it through another tub grinder several times over, turn it into mulch, sell it to Home Depot and Lowe's, who actually then dyes it all a consistent color, puts it in a plastic bag and sells it back to you. So that's the humorous thing of buying store-bought mulch, is you're really collecting your taxpayers' organic waste that's then just processed and sold back to a giant manufacturer or a giant retailer, and it's dyed, and then you want to use that in your garden because it looks consistent and clean, but is probably the worst product that you could do to try and create a natural base for your soil and your moisture retention. So it was just like a fascinating concept to me, kind of the same way we got into beekeeping and honey. John came to me, who's the original founder of Keys Bees, and he saw that the property on Google Earth looked so massive years ago. So in 2011, even before we opened up, he asked if we'd be interested in housing bees for him. And for me, it's always a sort of a quest for knowledge. And my response to him was, if you can teach me how to be a beekeeper, I'm more than willing to bring your hives in here and keep as many as you want. And over the years, you've kind of get so in touch with the land, especially restoring this property. You see throughout the year, bees are pollinating different things. You have a general all-around wildflower, which is going to be all the wildflowers that we saw on the berm, as well as like Spanish needle, that Biden's alba, or Jamaican dogwood flowers all at the same time. So does gumbo limbo, and so does black mangrove. So depending on the time of year, same way a sommelier can taste different notes in different wines, you could get that far out with the honey, and all the way down to the mineral content, the floral notes, and the different flavors and colorations that they have. So I'm learning all these things over the years about, the bees are pollinating these things for these reasons, and we're trying to restore, these native species of these plants, and all of a sudden you find out a gallon of honey can sell for upwards of, $100 to $150 when broken down into some smaller jars, and it's like, wait, what are we doing with this stuff? Why aren't we actually trying to, harvest and monetize and sustain the life of bees down here, which, is crucial to the environment? And watching this property kind of get restored because of how we started managing all of our land right here. Zero pesticide, zero herbicide, no longer allow mosquito control to come on site because they use a 70% kill rate non-selective adulticide. So you lose all of your pollinators, all of your dragonflies, your butterflies, your ladybugs, your parasitic wasps. Anything that would be contributing to the localized ecosystem has a 70% murder rate when they come through and spray from the plane or from the truck. So not allowing them to come here was kind of like having this, ever-evolving Narnia of, awesomeness, that you would walk into our garden and feel like you're in this, little fairy wonderland as all your plants and fruit trees and things are popping up around you. And then when you walk out into the mangrove hammock and you see the way that thing started to thrive again as we removed the trash and helped to take some of the invasives that were choking out all the native habitat, you really saw this land restore over the course of a decade. And it was, something that all of a sudden, from 26 years old, traveling 9-10 months out of the year, to being in one place and dedicating myself to one cause, it was like, man, what a totally righteous and worthwhile thing to do. And you know, trying to coexist the business with the restoration of the local land and kind of expanding this knowledge to tourists and stuff. That's really where this has all evolved to, and you know, it's what keeps me excited and motivated on a day-to-day basis to keep trucking forward to try to make it all happen. So, wood and honey, man. You see the beehives back here just got absolutely thrashed after the hurricane. But you got Cuban mahogany, mahogany. This is a sapodilla right here. Last Cuban chug that made it in right before the Wet Foot Dry Foot Act went away.